Hello everybody, my name's Rebecca and welcome back to my bookish travels. Today I am giving you a quick review of The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. This book is the first in the Burning series. It is going to be 4 books. 2 have been published thus far. The 3rd has been named but has not been released, and the 4th is still untitled. And this is a fantasy novel. So I'm going to go into a few things. I'm going to keep this first part very spoiler free, and then I'm going to jump into a couple of things I want to discuss that are spoilery. I do want to just mention that this cover, guys, is amazing. Honestly, this is quite a chunker, and I've been wanting to talk about it for a while, and I finally got some thoughts down on paper and knew it was time to share this with you guys. So I want to start off by telling you that I'm not going to tell you the synopsis. If you want to know, I will link the Goodreads for this book in the comment section down below. No, in the description box below, and you can go and read it there, but I want to just kind of delve into the story itself. So I know this probably isn't going to make a lot of sense to start this review at this point, but I want to talk about my top 5 favorite characters in this book, and it's in no particular order. The first one I want to mention is Tao, who is actually the main character of the story. We have Aduik, which is kind of the brute force of the team that kind of has a little bit of a change in character perception. At least I had that as the reader. Zuri, who is kind of the love interest, but also is part of the Gifted. Helen, who is actually a character that I hated at the start, but actually started to change my feelings for him later on. And Queen Soria. I think that's how her name is pronounced. So what's interesting here with her character is she doesn't play a very massive role in her part in the story, but as Queen, she is quite a major character of the story, and it's just how different things kind of roll out, and I feel like I'm going to want to delve further into her character. With this book specifically, I have a few non-spoilery things I'd like to mention in general about the story that I think you will find interesting, and then I'm going to switch into some spoiler discussions. So what I'll do is put the book down now, and when you see it come back on the screen, you'll know that you need to skip or stop watching if you don't want to be spoiled. The plot wasn't very surprising for this story, but the storyline and the actual development of the writing and the characters I found very engaging and original, and got to see quite a bit of depth in the characters themselves as well as the world. And I really loved that about this story. So although when you read the synopsis you're kind of like, oh, I know where this plot is going, there are still twists and turns that are not expected, and if you are a fantasy lover, you probably are going to either really love the direction or you're probably going to not necessarily like it very much, but it worked for me. This was the first story where all of the characters were written or seemed to be written as African American characters. So I didn't really envision any of the characters as Caucasian. They all felt very much in the same ethnicity, even though they were from different parts of this world itself. And I really liked that kind of emphasis, because for me, I don't necessarily get reading as much from a point of view of a character from a different ethnicity, especially African American. I find that that's probably something that I struggle finding books where that is the main character. So when I come across a book like that, I really want to pick it up and delve into it, because it's nice to be able to read a story that is from someone else's point of view and not always have it coming from somebody who is Caucasian. Reference points in this story are massive takeaways for me. I love that there's a map at the start of the story. There's also a list of the casting, and there's also a glossary, which really came in handy because there's certain things that are either part of this fantasy world or things that are very known already that I may not understand the name itself. So for me, I found these great reference points, and I did frequently go back and look at them or reference them at different points when I was reading the story, because it was a big grounding point for me. As somebody who doesn't necessarily always get into high fantasy or majority of fantasy where it is a whole new world, it is one that I kind of struggle with, although I love reading them. So for me, having these reference points at different, points of the book and knowing where to locate them from the start or at the end was fantastic and a great help for me throughout the book. And for that reason, I find this a huge sell point. Moving into the fantasy part, I did find this a very unique, original take on your typical, ordinary person becomes a hero of sorts. And for me, I have a hard time kind of getting into the world when it comes to fantasy. So what was nice about this is, although I had a hard time at the start, I found there was one point near the beginning part of the book that all of a sudden everything clicked and it just turned into clockwork. I just was speeding through this book, not like super fast because I'm not that fast of a reader, but I was speeding through a lot faster than I normally do, reading the story, and I just got fully involved in the story. And for me, that's a big thing because it usually takes me a bit to get into a fantasy world. So, fun fact here, this is actually the first one in a long time where I finished the book and I knew I needed to get the next one. So I sat on it for maybe 2 or 3 days, and finally I couldn't put it off any longer. I had to purchase the next one because I know it is one that I want to pick up really soon, but I'm trying to gauge it really well so that if there is a cliffhanger or if I'm just needing the next one right away, I don't have to wait for publication of the third one. So I'm trying to gauge when I read it. So I'm putting a little bit of time between them so that I'm not just rushing through and then being bookless in this series for a bit. So I hope you guys enjoyed that spoiler-free section because now I'm going to be delving into the spoiler section. If you guys want to comment down below, share some of your thoughts. If this has led you to feel interested in picking up this book and reading it, or maybe it's, not necessarily a book for you, what do you think is the story premise just based on the title? Not knowing the synopsis or anything about that, you hear the Rage of Dragons, what is the first thing that pops into your mind? And don't say the story involves dragons, because it does. But what's your thought from the title to the cover? What vibe are you getting from this book? So if you want to share your thoughts, feel free to do so in the comments below. At this point in time, I am going to delve into the spoilers that I want to mention. All right. The first and biggest thing that I had an issue with this story was Tao not being responsible for his father's death or even taking accountability for it. He was just so enraged and was like, I'm going to kill these people. He didn't once step back and be like, okay, my father literally sacrificed himself to take care of me and make sure that I didn't die because I made a stupid decision and I need to be thankful that my father did that, but also grieve for my father and take that step back from that anger. And I feel like we didn't get to see anything like that. We didn't really get to see him grieve his father. We didn't get to see him take accountability or responsibility for that situation. So that was a huge plot issue that I had that didn't get discussed in this book. And for me, I just found that it would have been nice to see something like that because it was such a massive shift in his compass of his life. And it would have been nice to see a little bit more that kind of occurred in that situation Maybe the sequel will have it. I'm not sure. We will see. But it is a plot point that I would have liked to have been discussed. But I also feel like we are past that point where now we kind of have to move on. I don't know if they're going to find a way to revert back, where Evan Winter is going to revert back to this specific situation and be able to cause some healing to occur. I don't know. We'll have to see. All right, it's another Tao one, but this one is him going into Izzy Hogo. I think that's how it's pronounced. If I'm butchering it, my sincere apologies. Him going and basically fighting the monsters in there and getting stronger and stronger and stronger and really developing. And this was just such an amazing point in the story. I feel like I probably, when I hit that point, I just did not want to stop reading. I was like, work, do I really need this job? I still worked, but in the back of my mind, I just did not want to stop reading at that point in the story, because it's like everything starts happening so quick after that. And it just was a very interesting thing, because he's the only one that's actually gotten to this point where he's like, I can do this, and actually wanting to do it. So it kind of became this very unique thing to him, and I'm curious to see where it progresses from here, because the way that Zuri tells him is anyone can do it. But the way that everyone else is interpreting it, only those that are gifted can. So why is it that they either don't know that this is a thing, that Zuri's the only one that's found it out, or that nobody else has tried this? It's just a really interesting plot development. And I really want to see further, because I feel like we're going to see this occurring in a little bit more in the next one. And I feel like it's going to be phenomenal. Okay, can we just take a moment to think about the fact that Jaid, when he shared with Tao that the group was made up of half-bloods and he was the only exception in the group, like, I knew that there was something different, but honestly, that is the situation, that there isn't supposed to be a mixing between the castes, but that has somehow occurred. Definitely was not expecting that little treat in the novel, and I think that it worked really well in the plot development, because it kind of became yet another driving point for Tao, and it just became very interesting that Jaid chose that exact moment to share that information. Like, he had to know that that was going to just be a disastrous situation. But also, talking about Jaid, I probably was more emotional with Jaid passing than I was about Tao's father, which is a horrible thing to say. I'm not saying that Tao's father's death was not emotional. His death was very brutal and just shocked me in what occurred. But Jaid's death was one that I just didn't want to happen. And when it did, guys, I just didn't know what to do in that moment. It hurt so much. It hurt so much. And I had to actually close the book for a few minutes, because I didn't want to progress on now that I knew that Jaid was just like not going to be continuing with the story and this was his end. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not ready for Jaid to pass. And that's kind of what happened. And I was just so upset about everything with Jaid's family. Like, it just was so heartbreaking. Like, his desire with how he kind of worked and how he had moved on and whatnot was just so heartbreaking, in the fact that he had such a tormented past. Very much like Tao had a tormented, vastly different to each other, but similar in some ways with how the torment worked for them. And the last thing that I want to mention, and it's more so because I'm curious to see how this is going to end up affecting the next book, and that is how Zuri is going to react to Tao being named the Queen's Champion. What is going to happen there? Because Tao and Zuri had that moment few chapters back in this story. And then now he is named the Queen's champion, which means he will be her husband. Unfortunately, queens do not take husbands, which means he also is supposed to be the father of her child, which also leads me to wonder, where is this going? Like, he's in love with Zuri. He always has been. Now he's agreed to be the queen's consort. Also, he is technically the most powerful of all of the men, so she should be going with the strongest one of them all, which does make sense with this world. But what is going to happen from here? I don't know. I have no idea. And for that reason, I honestly cannot wait to see where Evan Winter takes this story by storm. And I'm so excited to continue this journey from here with this world he has built. Every page I read is so exciting, but every page that I finish, I know that going on to the next one is going to destroy me because it's getting closer to the end. And I can't believe it. I just read the first book and it hasn't even been completed yet, but I'm already dreading the end of this world because it's just so original and I love it. Okay, I'm going to stop fangirling because the further I got into this spoiler section, the more I started fangirling. So let me know if you guys watched to this point in time and you've read the book, what were your thoughts? Did you like it? Are you excited to see where it goes from here? Please, if you're going to put a spoiler comment, be kind to those that haven't read it. Just label it spoiler, please. And I would love to talk more in the comments with you guys about this book. I don't know who else has read it aside from my one friend, because this was actually a book club pick of someone in the club that I'm in earlier in the year, and I haven't talked to anyone else about it, and I'd love to get some other opinions and discussion going. So I will let you guys go. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you then. Bye!